Well, hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. We are Lamborghini focused again in this video, but a sort of unheard of underdog enters the frame, literally I guess. And this model is the Islero. Now lots of people have been asking for videos on this car because there's next to no coverage of it on the internet. And this is quite an interesting piece of Lamborghini history, very much hitherto overlooked. But the basic project was one of Ferruccio Lamborghini's brainchilds or brainchildren. And it's funny, looking back now, we don't think of Lamborghini as a fairly conservative sort of guy, but actually he was. And the 350 GT V, which then became the 350 GT, the first model he ever produced, was very much a sort of Gran Turismo car, the car that you would sort of jump in and drive from Rome to Paris in a day or two without even breaking into a sweat. It was that sort of car that would take your luggage, have good visibility, plenty of power, a good range, big fuel tank, all that sort of stuff, luxurious seats. That's what they were about. And the sort of screamers, such as the Miura and the Countach and the Diablo, etc., are what Lamborghini's become famous for. But they weren't actually his original vision. And he wanted to outdo Enzo Ferrari, not with the likes of a sort of semi-racing car, but with a GT car, with a Gran Turismo car, as I say, that would cross continents in the 1960s. And that's where we come to the Islero, because it's a very subtle car in a lot of ways. It's not the most astoundingly stylized car, particularly that Lamborghini have done, but it is sort of true to Ferruccio's vision and his dream. And it's a two-seater with two very occasional seats in the back. And one of the first things that surprises you about this car is how small it is. It's got the 4-litre V12 in it, which had been used in the 400 GT before this. It was announced in 1968 at the Geneva Motor Show, along with the Espada. Talk about having two stunning cars. Most manufacturers would be happy with one. Not Lamborghini. Let's give it the large, announce two cars at the same motor show. And the Islero is very different from the Espada. The Espada came from the Marzal, a very extravagant piece of styling, which turned into the Espada, was sort of toned down. But the Islero was never meant to be anything other than the type of GT car that I'm talking about. But it was probably one of the cars that Ferruccio most had a hand in styling, certainly. And the car was built by a coach builder called Marazzi. But Ferruccio was reputedly, and I can believe it, quite sort of hands-on and involved with the overall design brief. He didn't just give, like he did with the Miura, give Bertone a chassis and say, okay, clothe that. He was really quite concerned and interested in the style of the Islero. They ended up making 125 Isleros in 1968-69, and then they brought out an Islero S because the quality of Marazzi's construction was pretty awful, actually. It was sort of the worst of hand-builtness, really. Nothing quite fitted, the finish wasn't good, etc. So they upped the ante. They decided to update the model in all sorts of ways, slight modifications to the engine, bigger brakes, things like that. And they brought out the Islero S after they'd made 125 Isleros. And they then made 100 Islero S's, so a grand total of production of 225. And it just so happens, and this never ceases to amaze me about the activities in the workshop, we seem to go through phases of different makes and models of car. One minute we'll go through an Aston Martin V8 phase and have 3 of them here at the same time, or a Ferrari Daytona phase, or whatever it is. And this time it's the Islero's turn, because we've got 3 of them out of a total of 225 in the workshop at the moment, and we've got a 4th on the way from overseas. So we're sort of Islero-centric a bit at the moment, for want of a better way of putting it. Very interesting car, quite a pleasant car to drive because it's so small and light, with that lusty V12 pulling it along. It's quite a mover. The S topped out at just over 161, which, bear in mind, this is 1969. That was moving for then. And a 0 to 60 time of under 6 seconds. That was no slouch at all. That was right in the supercar sort of territory, or getting that way. But there are one or two interesting things about this car. They totally restyled the interior on the S, brought it sort of very much up to date, although it did suffer still with that Italian driving position of sort of legs scrunched up here somewhere and arms out there. And these days, what a lot of people do is put a spacer behind the steering wheel. There are companies that actually make them for different models of Italian car, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Maserati, Alfa Romeo, and they actually space the steering wheel out to give a more normal sort of driving position. And these cars are quite Italian in that respect, actually. This is the S that we've got here. This is a beautiful example of an Islero S. We're just doing a bit of fine tuning on it. The car's recently been restored to a very high standard, but I'm just optimizing it. The shock absorbers, it hasn't got the original dampers on. They're a little bit stiff, so it crashes over bumps, which it doesn't need to particularly. The engine's put a few kilometers on it since it was rebuilt, so we're just battening everything down, tightening everything up. I'm adjusting the carburetors with my trusty hose pipe and screwdriver. But styling-wise, aren't these vents on the side, which are particular to the S only, just wonderful? I think they're fabulous. What a piece of amazing design that is. The sort of thing that the Italians were just, you know, phenomenally good at. It sort of represents jet age, 1950s, 1960s, just wonderful. And these beautiful magnesium wheels with the knock-on spinners again, which the Miura had and the very early Espadas. But a very interesting and sort of underappreciated car. And they've been used in quite a few films as well, actually. They made 3 right-hand drive Islero S's only, and one of them, a silver one, was used in the Roger Moore film, The Man Who Haunted Himself. And we got another one here, a brown Islero non-S, so one of the first 125. And that car was in a film called I See Naked. It was broadcast as, and it was a not too displeasing on the eye Croatian actress who drove it, Sylva something or other, I can't just remember her name, Koscina or something like that, who drove it, and drove it very well, actually. So that car, that exact car from the movie is here. And the third Islero we've got here is another very interesting car, because this was Ferruccio Lamborghini's own personal Islero. And we had the tremendous honour of being given his Countach. It actually came from overseas to come here to be sorted out, Ferruccio Lamborghini's one and only Countach. And that's a few videos back. But this Islero was his personal car, and he had it built to his, not only his design, but also to his specifications. And it had a few interesting things, like instead of the front bumper being constant, it was split. A few other differences. And the white Islero, that again has come from a fair way away and we have been given the job of restoring, was his personal Islero built for him. And he used to commute between Sant'Agata Bolognese and Cento, where his tractor factories were, into Tuscany, and also up to the Italian lakes, where his 24-cylinder powered Riva powerboat was waiting for him on either Lake Iseo or Lake Como. And he used to commute between these places in that very Islero. So we've got 3 interesting cars here at the moment, all the same. I don't know what it works out as a total production percentage, 1.5% something of all the Islero production ever we happen to have in the garage at the moment. So yeah, I'm going to be doing a little bit of tweaking. This is more a sort of review video than getting into any real serious work on them. But yeah, we'll take it for a run and see how we get on. funny to be sat in the seat of when you've seen a movie or somebody like Sylva Koscina, who it turns out is Italian, before any Yugoslav, Croatian, Italians throw their hands up in horror. Yeah, it's Sylva Koscina, and she was driving this car actually very competently in the movie, and it was her because it was one take. Yeah, the car gets about 3 minutes of airtime, I think, but it's always strange. I mean, it means nothing in the real world, but you try telling that to collectors who pay exorbitant premiums just because a car has belonged to this person or that person, which I suppose in a way, I'm not trying to justify it for 1 second, but it is understandable because these cars are about it's the story, it's the person. Even though the fit and finish on this is supposedly not very good, this is actually one of the best Islero interiors I've seen, certainly Series 1s. The dash is quite nice on it, and when we restore Ferruccio Lamborghini's car, I'm hoping we can get the dash at least as good as this. But one of the overriding things is these are very small cars and they're very light, and that means it feels very nimble on the road. The ride's smooth. This is actually much smoother than the blue car. We need to dial the dampers back a bit on that. They are adjustable, so that's easy. But it's not a bad place to be. I mean, obviously things have moved on. A GT car now for crossing continents is very different to what it was 50 years ago. But even so, this is it's a pleasant place to be, and I can actually imagine doing a few miles in this car in a day, not being a particular problem. It's not too noisy, seat is reasonably comfortable. I'm swimming around a bit on this smooth leather seat here as we go around the corners, but yeah, very agreeable. And of course, what is not to like about that lovely Lamborghini V12 engine up front? Yeah, I'm not quite sure what colour this is, actually. It's there was a brown metallic, a coppery brown metallic, which Lamborghini did, called Luci di Bosco, or Lights of the Forest, which it looks very good on a Miura with the gold sills and things. And this is not too far away from that colour. I think it's a little lighter. But still, I mean, it's amazing in the 1960s and 70s how many Ferraris, for example, were not supplied new in red. They were lovely pastel shades, blue metallics. I'm thinking of Celeste blue, which is a sort of turquoisey, Hyperion blue, a light blue metallic, blue chiaro, which is a bit darker, even though chiaro means light in Italian. But there were lots of different colours. That Ferrari, lovely, beautiful metallic pastel shades that Lamborghini and Ferrari used, and they really do look, when they're restored back to those instead of the sort of resale red, they look stunning, absolutely stunning. I'm just going to open this car up now because we're all up to temperature and pressure, and I'm hoping this Islero performs very well. Just lovely and flat cornering. Beautiful, absolutely lovely, effortless in a way, and this cabin is particularly well insulated from the engine, so it does, although of course you get induction and exhaust roar on acceleration, it's quite subdued inside here. The other thing about this car is it's got a lovely older style exhaust system on it, modern stainless steel systems. I've been over this with Harry and his Espada, and I'm going to do some research on this in the future, but a lot of modern stainless steel systems are too quiet. They don't let enough resonance from the engine out, and this one is actually, it makes a very agreeable noise. Just yeah, there's one thing about the Islero is it actually drives far better than it looks. A lot of cars it's the other way around, that the driving doesn't match the appearance. But this is, I've driven so many cars over the years where I've been disappointed. They've been a sort of idol almost, and I've jumped in them and thought this is going to be amazing. and they've turned out to be utterly horrendous. I just haven't got on with them at all. But this car is absolutely lovely. It really is. It's. I'm just going to open it up again. Goes really well. Very nice acceleration. All there. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we will be back with something else very soon.